What is academic dishonesty when you're talking about writing? Here's a copy of the policy in the student handbook. And we're going to be using this as well as the material from our syllabus to answer your discussion questions and your assignments for this week. So this is about cheating, and here is about cheating. This is academic integrity in general. And here we have plagiarism. So LMU prohibits offering the work of another as one's own without proper acknowledgement. Any student who fails to give credit for quotations or essentially identical material taken from books, magazines, encyclopedia, other reference works and themes, reports, and writing, or that of a fellow student has committed plagiarism. And there are additional rules that follow with your different schools. Basically, any idea that does not come from you needs to be cited and referenced. This is for ethical reasons, but it's also for reasons of professionalization and support. In a world of false news, citations pointing to accurately used and correctly used sources is absolutely vital today. So, for this week, I want you to think about what plagiarism is. Use your syllabus and your student handbook and cite them, practicing avoiding plagiarism, in your answer. And think about, is copying another student's post plagiarism? Is using an AI-generated text plagiarism? Why might a college student plagiarize a paper instead of just writing their own? During COVID, a lot of students who had never plagiarized before self-reported that they had plagiarized or cheated in their online classes because they were just overwhelmed and they couldn't keep up. And this trend has continued, particularly in online education, since then. Thinking about the ethical and social ramifications of this is going to be something that we are discussing in this class, and something that you could look up in your descriptive personal essay if you want to, coming up. But first of all, let's look at original text, paraphrasing, summarizing, and how to avoid plagiarism before we dive into what plagiarism looks like. So here's an original text about the Perry Preschool program, and here is the source, Arresting Delinquency by Dan Hurley, Psychology Today, March 1985, page 66. So this is not an MLA citation, but it is the citation material. And for this class, you would be putting it in MLA style. Now, how would you paraphrase all of the information here? Well, you would paraphrase it just by putting the entire text in your own words. That is, giving the main point of every sentence in the order that it's given above and saying it in your own words. What's the value of something like that? Well, if you need that information and you cite it accurately as it is here, that at the end of all the information you're using, you have referenced Hurley, and what you should also do is introduce Hurley at the beginning, which we see in this reference to this study, though you could say according to Dan Hurley in the article Arresting Delinquency, and then give the information that follows. Why put it in your own words? Because if this is part of a much longer work that's all in your own words about making interventions in young children's lives to prevent crime and avoid delinquency, having it stay in your words keeps the reader from having a sort of whiplash going back and forth, hearing different people's voices. They can see that you have gotten this information from a credible source, but they also get to continue to have that same sort of voice following throughout the paper. So that is a paraphrase. Now, what is usually most useful is actually a summary. Because a summary, again, gives the main idea, but it focuses on what is most relevant, either in the entire passage or to the author's main argument. So if the main argument you're making is not about intervening in students' lives, but in looking at the students who were left behind, who were not included, who were not helped, then that is what you would bring out in your summary, which is much shorter, again in your own words, and still contains a citation. Notice none of these are plagiarized because all of them cite all of the material that they are using from the original source. And they would do it even better if they had this window technique, which your book talks about, which introduces the source before it's used. That way it is less confusing for the reader and it makes you sound more credible. Remember, citations aren't just about ethics. It's about showing that your work is supported by other professionals out there, that you know what you're talking about because you've done your research. So, that is things done correctly. Now, let's look at a case of it not done correctly, which I'm sure we will not encounter in this class, but so you know, so you can tell your friends. Here is an original text. It's from Criminal Investigation by Christine Hess-Orthman and Karen M. Hess. Here is plagiarism. It is giving all the information. It's giving it in the student's, kind of the student's own words. It's a rough paraphrase with some direct quoting, but there is no reference anywhere. Absolutely plagiarized because this is not the student's thoughts. And it doesn't even look like the student's thoughts. I mean, how would they get these statistics unless they claim to be a member of the bike recovery task force? These are specific statistics that had to come from something. Citing their source would have just looked a lot smarter. Now this is also plagiarized even though it does contain a citation. How is that? Well, because the citation references this material here, but it doesn't reference the material down here, which also comes from Orthman and Hess. Every time you use a source, you need to reference that source after that material. So the text does not say 95%, but it does say only 5% are returned. So the student from that has said 95% are not registered and so not returned. That isn't the student's original information, even though they did the math, then said if 5% are returned, 95 are missing. And this 200 million. And the student might not even know they've plagiarized because they have this citation above. But they have. Now here is properly cited material. We've got the student's own example and then their advice. And the entire sentence that is being taken from Orthman and Hess is cited right there at the end. So we know where this entire sentence came from. And they've gone a step further. They've referenced the National Bike Registry, which is cited in the original right there. And so they're giving credit both to the source of their source and to Orthman and Hess. That is a great use of citation. And it makes the reader look smarter. We know that all of these numbers come from a reliable source. And none of this is just something that they're pulling out of the air or guessing at. This is good resistance to plagiarism.